Welcome back, everyone, to the eCoreAcademy e-learning platform. Today, my name is AJay and I'll be back with you guys for another anatomy and physiology video today, of course, underneath our science courses. And this is a general video just to really kick off the muscular system. After looking at our muscular system overview, really getting you guys to think, I'm going to be going into the fundamentals of what this system really is. And one of its fundamental parts, going through these definitions and terms. So this is a very term-heavy lesson, so I'd suggest that you either look through the notes that will be put up on the website, or you can make your own notes. Just take out a pencil and paper and find out whatever works for you, really, to memorize these things. I don't want you guys to memorize it necessarily. Maybe learn it instead of memorizing it, but utilize certain memorization skills that can help you learn it faster. But before we jump into the meat of today's lesson, please make sure you smash the subscribe button down below, hit that like button on this video, turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on any of our channel's latest videos. Feel free to utilize the comment section down below as well. Your feedback does not go unnoticed. So today's topic is all about the basic components of muscles. And we're going to be looking at the basic components of muscles and their specialized functions. So these terms and definitions and their specialized functions within the muscle itself. We can't just have the anatomy of it, we also have to have the physiology part of it. Anatomy being those separate components and physiology being their purpose and how they actually work together. All right, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. Let's take a look at the overall system overview. I did not go over this in the previous video. I just really wanted to get the ball rolling a bit. But now we're going to actually be taking a look at exactly what we're going to be covering in this course. So what we're going to be covering includes the following topics. So the components of muscles, which is exactly what we're going to be going over today. And we'll be taking each part of the muscle and each physiological role of sections of the muscle in separate videos, really going into depth with those. And then, of course, we'll look at the types of muscles, types of movement, actin and myosin, how it really starts the whole process of motion, causing those muscles to flex and extend and relax, and the major and minor muscles of the body, and then the effects of exercise on the skeletal and muscular systems, as well as muscular system disorders and accidents. So these are overarching concepts that will be rearranged in video format. I just want to get the overarching concepts to you, but you guys will have to stay in tune for the upcoming video lessons that I have planned. So let's get into the basic components of muscle, and let's start off with the muscle fiber. So this is the standard unit. The muscle fiber is considered the standard unit of the muscle. It's not the basic unit of the muscle, but it is the most standard and most independent part of the muscle itself. So and it can do things on its own, essentially. So the muscle fiber is the standard component of the muscle that attaches together in order to develop muscle tissue and layers. So every time you work out, you're tearing up muscle fibers and replacing them. So the muscle fiber itself is that your standard component of your muscle, and they basically attach together to develop that muscle tissue, which will be organized into different layers, sections, and some of them have different purposes as well. We don't have the same exact type of muscle fiber all throughout our body. It's all consistent and inconsistent. Sorry. But every time you work out, you're actually tearing up muscle fibers and replacing them. That's how you build muscle, essentially. You're tearing up those older muscle fibers, the ones that aren't as well conditioned or as good quality, and then you're replacing them with new ones. And myofibrils. So these are what makes up the basic muscle fiber and is responsible for the chemical imbalance in order to produce muscle twitches. So it's a muscle fiber. Essentially, it's a long chain of myofibrils that make up a muscle fiber, and they will actually produce that energy for twitching and flexing. So that's the whole purpose of a muscle, essentially. The function of the muscle is derived from the myofibril that makes up your muscle fiber. And of course, these are different examples of muscles throughout the body. The one in the two in the middle, they're representing parts of the calf muscle. And then, of course, on the end, we also have another calf muscle. And then on the entirely on the left side, we have a given section of the hamstring. So these are all different types of muscles, and you can see they have different striated patterns. Those are the linings across it. So that's different thickness of muscle fibers. Essentially, what I'm showing you is we have different muscle fibers throughout our body and different muscles as well. Now let's take a look at actin and myosin binding sites. So I'm not going to get into what actin and myosin actually do yet. I want to save that for another video. It's a very important video, a lot more complex. So I want to introduce this to you before I introduce that. But let's look at the the locations on the muscle. So these are the actin and myosin binding sites, part one, and these are the different components of the muscle, essentially. More components. So we have sarcomeres and myofilaments. And guys, don't get worried. Everything correlates with each other. That's what I love a lot about anatomy and physiology. You'll see one item is either within something or it includes something. So, sarcomeres, they're groups of myofilaments within the muscle fiber that separate them to develop striations and make it easier for actin and myosin pairing. So, what exactly is a sarcomere? It's within a it's on top of a muscle fiber. It's sections of muscle fibers with myofilaments and myofibrils. So, it's essentially a myofibril is included in a sarcomere. It's a collection of these of different sections of myofibrils that makes up a sarcomere. And what happens is on the very outer side of a sarcomere, and I'll explain that, you have these different striations, which are called your myofilaments, and these are thick and thin filaments that make up the body of a myofibril and actively participate in opening and closing binding sites. So let's just recap what I just said. So you have your myofilaments, which are your little thick and thin strands of essentially tissue and just matter. They're just matter. They're muscle matter. And what they do is they attach together to actually make a different pattern, which essentially makes the entire myofibril. So a myofibril is made up of myofilaments. Then myofilaments basically merge together to make sarcomeres, which are sections of these myofilaments on the outside, the sections of these myofibrils. And then essentially your myofibrils are a part of, and your sarcomeres, they're a part of the entire muscle tissue, which is your muscle fiber, made up of your muscle fiber. So it attaches to your muscle fiber. So it goes, myofilaments make up your myofibril, many myofibrils make up the sarcomere, and then all the sarcomeres make up a muscle fiber. And then, of course, your muscle fiber makes your muscle, your tissue. That's really your muscle. Tissue is your muscle. And if we take a look here, this is your entire myofibril, as you can see here at the bottom labeled. Right there. And then we have these different, these different striated sections of your myofibril. I apologize, guys. I'm so sorry. It's supposed to be sarcomeres are a group of myofilaments, and sarcomeres are a part of a myofibril. So let me just rearrange how I said that. Myofilaments, then sarcomeres. Sarcomeres are groups of myofilaments. Then sarcomeres are just little sections of myofibrils. Then myofibrils make up your muscle fiber, and then muscle fiber makes up the tissue. So that's how it goes. So right here we have sarcomeres, which are a section of a myofibril, and it's made up of these different myofilaments. Myofilaments. And essentially these myofilaments are these striated patterns right here with these thick and thin bands of tissue, essentially. That's what makes this up. And they have these alternating thick and thin to actually help with actin and myosin to get in. That's why they're not all just one given pattern without any gaps. It has to do with flexing and extending. Actin and myosin binding sites, part 2. Let's take a look at Z-bands and sarcoplasmic reticulum. So these Z-bands are the corresponding spacing between each respective sarcomere on the myofibril that helps to separate the myofilament strands from immediately pairing actin and myosin. So if you recall from that previous image, we have we have those thick bands and we have those thin bands. So those thick bands are basically the large sections of the actual myofibril. The thin bands are a little section on top of the thick band of the myofilament. So those myofilaments, the reason that why they're different and the reason why they have little gaps called Z-bands in between those multiple myofilaments is because they want to give space in order for actin to actually seep up through seep into the muscle, and then those myosin binding sites are going to be located there as well. And once they pair, they're going to cause the muscle to actually flex. And I'll explain that completely later, but I just want you guys to get the notion of what it looks like, each one of these objects and each one of these items and what they're actually supposed to represent. And then, of course, you have the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It's the very base end of a single myofibril that anchors it to another myofibril and the base of a muscle fiber. So if you think of a muscle fiber, maybe like a giant cup, like you have this, or just like a regular sized cup. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a bunch of pieces of paper. You're going to roll them up, or just take pieces of chalk. Let's keep it a bit more dense. So let's say that pieces of chalk are the myofibrils. All you're doing is you're sticking them into the cup, and then once they're all together, they're compact. That makes your muscle fiber. However, there needs to be something that attaches it, keeps it down at the bottom. So maybe you want to put glue, maybe really sticky solution. That's really what the sarcoplasmic reticulum is. It's a bit more of a hardened, sticky solution that anchors them all together and helps encapsulate it with another type of part of the muscle, which I'll explain, that makes your muscle fiber up. So it helps anchors them. And let me just draw that out here. So if we have an example like here, we have that cup right here, and we fill it with pieces of chalk. essentially. This chalk, let's zoom into the bottom right here. So this chalk piece needs to be anchored to the bottom, right? So that we have to have some sort of device that kind of anchors it right to the bottom so that it doesn't fall out, essentially. That's what the sarcoplasmic reticulum is doing. It's essentially attaching this piece of chalk and anchoring each separate myofibril together and to the very base of the muscle fiber. Now into basic components of a muscle, part 3. This is for the diagrams. So this right here is your example of the muscle fiber, as I was explaining. This giant thing, this entire thing right here, not excluding anything or looking at anything in a separate term. This entire figure right here is actually your given muscle fiber. And then within that, of course, we have the myofibril. So at the base of your muscle fiber, right here, you have your sarcoplasmic reticulum, oftentimes just abbreviated as R, sarcoplasmic reticulum right here. Then you have your myofibrils right here, of course, myofibrils. And then finally, of course, you have your given myofibril. And within the myofibril itself, you're going to have these sarcomeres, which are these separate sections, essentially, these little sections of thick and thin myofilaments, sarcomere. And then, of course, this little strand in the very middle of it, this brownish strand, the darker brown strands are going to be your thin filaments, thin myofilaments, and then the entire large, lighter colored strand kind of looks like a fencing. That's your thick filaments. And then, of course, they all, encompass together. They make up your myofibril, which then makes up your muscle fiber. And I'll talk about what this actual surrounding piece right here is in the upcoming slides. So now let's continue with the major components of a muscle. These are more major than they are minor, as I said before. So these are the fascicles and the sarcoplasm. So those are the minor components. They are the standard components. Now we're getting into larger, more major components of a muscle. So fascicles, they are groups of muscle fibers that are the major building blocks of muscles and are located all around the bone itself for skeletal muscles. That basically what it's saying is skeletal muscle are just basically your muscles that are attached directly to the skeleton and use the skeleton's movement to flex itself. And examples are like your bicep. Your major muscles are all skeletal muscles, and then essentially it's a building block of muscle, and muscle fibers make up fascicles. So a bunch of muscle fibers make up that fascicle. The standard unit makes up the fascicle. And then here we have the sarcoplasm, which is considered the cytoplasm of the fascicle, and it surrounds on the outside of each muscle fiber. That's that little section of the given. If you think about the muscle fiber, that was that little covering over it. That's the sarcoplasm, keeps it all together from the sides. Although the sarcoplasmic reticulum, they're kind of both subsections of each other, and they're outside of each muscle fiber, and they hold the myofibrils in place as well in order to anchor them to the fascicle and keep them all together. So this is an example right here. The very center right here, this little strand right here, kind of sticking out a little bit, that's your muscle fiber. And then right here is your fascicle. That outer covering of the fascicle is your sarcoplasm. Oops. Your sarcoplasm. All right. Now let's take a look at some of the major layers of the muscle, and then we'll call it a day, really. I just don't want to get into too much depth in which I confuse you guys. I want to break this up into easier chunks and bite sizes of videos and lessons. So part 1, we're just going to go over the major layers of the muscle for now, and then I will explain each one of them in separate terms. So this is basically everything you need to know about the basic components of a muscle, and we'll get into the depth on what each one of them really is and what they do in motion. So the endomysium, endomysium. People call it endomysium. I call it endomysium. We'll call it endomysium. and it has many reticular fibers and strands, which is used for the transport of protein throughout the muscle as it encapsulates each individual fiber. So this is the first official layer of the muscle, and it essentially encapsulates each and every single fiber, and it surrounds the sarcoplasm. So it's outside of the sarcoplasm, and it helps form that layer that the sarcoplasm does as well. And of course, it helps for the transport of proteins throughout the muscle. That's why they always say, you got to eat a lot of protein in order to build big muscles. The endomysium or the endomysium, whichever one you want to call it, it actually utilizes the protein directly for the muscle and the muscle fibers. So the perimysium, this has more connective tissue that has higher adipose concentration, and it groups muscle fibers into bundles for the fascicle. So the perimysium is the second largest layer. The second from the smallest layer, second smallest layer. It's larger than the endomysium, so second from the bottom, and it has higher fat concentration, and it groups muscle fibers into bundles for the fascicle. And an interesting thing is the body actually retains lots of fat. Sometimes when you're not super you're not fat at all, and you're really good athlete, you run like 10 miles every week, and you might still have a bit of fat on you. That fat is actually to protect you. So that adipose is helping protect your joints and also your muscles, because it's always good to have that in order to protect the movement. So now let's take a look at what we just covered. So we have the endomysium, which is surrounding each muscle fiber, surrounds muscle fiber. Muscle fiber around the sarcoplasm. We'll just say endo. Endo meaning inside, so innermost. And then, of course, we have the perimysium, which surrounds the fascicle. So, right, perimysium. And it surrounds your fascicle. All right, now let's move on. Major layers of the muscle, part 2. We have the epimysium. You can call it the epimysium. I call it epimysium. I think it's just easier. I like these pronunciations for myself. The proper way to pronounce this is epimysium, but I just like to call it something that really helps me memorize it, so I call it the epimysium. But it's dense connective tissue that wraps itself around the entirety of the muscle and regulates its temperature by preventing the amount of friction that it actually produces. So obviously, when you're contracting and moving your muscles, especially with your tendons, tugging on the ends of the muscle, and also with the bone that's attached, you want to relieve the amount of friction that you have. So that outermost layer is going to be responsible for that. And this is what really you see in these diagrams of muscles. As you can see here in this diagram, that silky, kind of roughish texture actually helps protect the muscle, relieve its friction a little bit, but also make sure that it's well protected and it has lots of striations on the outside. So after a strenuous workout, it is more common for other muscle layers and fibers to tear and replace, like those inner muscle fibers, those tissues. They're going to tear or replace during workout. They can, but it's not healthy for the epimysium to do so, or the epimysium, or whatever you want to call it. But essentially, when the epimysium tears during a workout, that means you have a muscular system disorder. It means you got injured. You probably pulled a muscle, tore a muscle. That's supposed to replace naturally without workout. So if there's an immediate rip or tear during a workout, that's no good sign, and you'll feel the pain. Believe me, by all means, even though I've not had that happen to me, you will definitely feel the pain. There are a lot of nerve receptors in that area, also incorporating the integumentary system as well. Alright everyone, so that'll be it for today's video. This has been the eCoreAcademy learning platform. Please make sure to like and subscribe down below. Feel free to leave a comment down below as well. Check out our website at www.ecoreacademy.org. See what kind of, all the interesting notes, quizzes, worksheets that will go along with each and every single one of our videos, organized into their separate course studies, all organized for you guys. All you have to do is make an account for free, and you get full unlocked access to what we offer there. And please don't forget to turn on post notifications here so you're up to date with each and every single one of our videos. Feel free to email us at eCoreAcademy@gmail.com if you have any questions or if you just want to reach out. And in the description box down below, we have the full links to our social media accounts at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. See what kind of interesting content we have there. We have also added our new, we've just created our new TikTok, and we're going to be putting a lot of nonchalant, really just casual things. Not all just academic, but we want to, bring some laughter into your day. Completely off topic. We just want to bring, cool videos, cool graphics, and just funny little skits that we have for you guys. So thank you all for watching. This has been AJay Raj, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.